crunch today?
No.
Okay. Thank you for tuning in to Grieving Voices. Today, my guest is Angie. Oh, shoot. Hanson. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Bleep.
Bleep, yeah.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Grieving Voices. Today, my guest is Angie Hanson, and she shares her story of immense loss, a journey marked by the deaths of her 1-year-old son, Garrett, her husband, Jack, her brother, Seth, and her sister in law, Brooke. In her own profound grief, Angie found solace in a mission to change the narrative around grief, to bring light into the darkest moments, and to offer genuine support to those walking the path of loss. She founded Butterflies and Halos in 2022, a greeting card company that seeks to bridge the gap between sympathy and understanding, between condolence and companionship. Angie is also publishing her first book, Chapters of a Resilient Heart, that will be published in May 2024. So it's actually on pre-order and coming out very soon as we're recording this. And she also co-hosts a podcast, From Loss to Light, touching on all aspects of losses and how people have found their light. Thank you so much for being here. And I love the podcast episode title, and I love the book title as well. How did those come to be?
Well, honestly, for the podcast, I co-host it with a fellow widow friend of mine, Michelle. And when we started talking about doing the podcast together, we were just like, we wanted to focus on how people have found their light, and through any losses, because we know that losses are not just death. And we know that there's losses from divorces, drug addiction, abuse, anything, job losses, pet losses. And so we really wanted to touch on all those and we wanted people to figure out and let us know and let our listeners know, how did they find their light? And it's been so inspirational listening to how people have journeyed through their losses and they found their light. And especially the people that have come through like the recovery of any drug addiction, those are the ones that really just grab at my heart. And I'm so amazed by them. So their resilience is amazing. And so that kind of steps into my book title, Chapters of a Resilient Heart. I kind of always love the name Chapters. I've always wanted to own a bookstore named Chapters. I've just loved that. And so I kind of had chapters of this, chapters of that, and nothing was just really settling with me. And then actually were on a trip in Costa Rica, and we were sitting there talking about the title of the book. And my husband that I'm married to now, the word resilient came up, and we were just like, well, that's kind of everything that I embody is, the resilience of my losses and what I've kind of, what I've encompassed by doing what I'm doing now out there in the grief world is I'm leaning into that resilience of everybody. So there we are, my new book, Chapters of a Resilient Heart.
I love it.
Yeah.
And what were you doing before?
Well, I actually was working in a taffy store, like saltwater taffy.
Oh, okay.
So there's a little local store here. She's actually an antique store. And I kind of worked for her just part-time doing some things. And um, she actually started this taffy saltwater online taffy company where she ships out monthly subscription boxes to people and you get taffy surprises every month. So I kind of learned a little bit of the online industry through her and through helping her and working for her. So that kind of just put me in motion to, understand going forward with with my business and all that. So, yeah. And then, I just, before my deaths, I actually worked in the banking industry. So I worked, doing everything in a small bank here. So, but then death happened and knocked at my front door, and I never turned back to that job.
Has a way of doing that, doesn't it? It just like
Yes.
sends everything. And what were some of the questions, like big questions you were asking yourself as you were, I mean, because you've had a lot of loss and we'll get to those, but what was coming up for you as you were going through this? And first of all, like, how did you even get out of bed?
Every day, in the beginning after I was working at the bank when my son had died, and the biggest obstacle for me was, how, moving forward in life and how does that look like and what does that look like? And it was it was very, very hard. But my daughter was 4 at the time, and, I just really leaned into wanting her to have a good life and the life that she deserved and honoring her and, just wanting her to be able to have happy, fun times, and I had to figure out how that looked like and what that looked like, and so I just basically every single day, it was, "Okay, you can get up today, and today if you shower, perfect. Today, if you just, if you get to go outside and sit, perfect." So the questions that I asked myself surrounding that, like, what matters most now? Does a working a 9 to 5 in the banking world matter? Absolutely not. It didn't matter to me anymore. I didn't care, and my only cares were my family at the time.
Would you say in some ways, I just in the conversations I've
Mm.
had over the last 4 years plus years of having my podcast too, it's like when you have other children that you have to get up for, they're almost like your saving grace in a way, I imagine. Did you find that true for you too? Like she was really your reason to get up.
Yes. Yes, and her name is Gracie. So, she was my saving grace, and, with you know, my husband and I, Jack, we definitely grieve differently. So he was more of a go out. We lived on an acreage, so he was more of a let's go outside and work, 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 keep my mind occupied. Do that, do that. And for me, I was just so lost, I couldn't think of how I could move forward. And but every morning when Gracie would come to me and I would see her, I'm just like this is not fair for her. She deserves to have this beautiful life, and so she did. She saved me from going into a rabbit hole.
Was your son, for those that, I mean, don't know you or have never heard you speak or be on podcasts and things, your son was one, Garrett was one. Was he sick much of that year, first year?
No, Garrett was the, epitome of health. He had just turned 1, and he died 6 days after his first birthday, and he had just had his, one-year checkup on that Friday, and he died on a Tuesday, and he had a heart defect that went undetected, and it's a very undetectable heart defect as well. It's got a really long name. It's like ectopic origin of the right coronary artery. So basically, his right coronary artery was kinked. And
Mm.
so a person suffers sudden cardiac death in extreme rest or extreme activity. And, you've heard similar stories, maybe of athletes dying on a court or a football field. And that is similar to what Garrett had. And he was resting, he was sleeping, he was taking his afternoon nap when he died.
Mm.
And there really are no signs or symptoms, because that was one of the things I had really asked our pediatrician was, did I miss something? As a mom, I was just holding guilt. Did I miss something? And nothing. I mean, he ate well, he was happy, I mean, joyful. I mean, his coloring, everything was perfect. I mean, even the doctor was like, I don't know how I could have missed that, and we did talk to some lead cardiologists at our local children's hospital, and they said that there was nothing really that we could have seen or noticed that would have show us that he had that.
And you mentioned your husband had also passed away, and so how far out was the loss of your husband from when you both lost your son?
Well, our son died. Garrett died in June of 2006. And then about a year and a few months later, in 2007, my husband Jack was diagnosed with cancer. So he had melanoma when he was 21 years old, and so he had a mole removed, some invasive surgery on his arm, but it was nothing that had spread. And then, we're 15 years later when our son dies. And I honestly believe the stress of our son dying, ignited those cancer cells in his body again, and he was trying to be the strongest for all of us. And that's who Jack was. So he was diagnosed, let's see, fall of 2007. So just a little over a year after our son had passed. And then Jack, he was diagnosed with ocular melanoma. So he had a large tumor in his eye,
Oh, wow.
and it had spread through to his liver and his brain and his spleen. So, at that moment, we were told, Jack was diagnosed terminal. And, we didn't know how long he would have with us, but we weren't going to not fight. So we fought and fought and fought. He did chemo, radiation, all the things. And Jack battled for about 16 months before losing his life to the cancer. So he died in February 2009. So just 2.5 years after our son had died.
And your brother Seth and your sister-in-law, like this,
I know.
I don't even like it's not nervous laughter, but it's just like you can't even wrap your head around it.
Yeah, yeah. It's unbelievable sometimes when, when people hear it for the first time, it's unbelievable. My brother Seth had actually been battling a brain tumor for about 5 years. And him and his wife, they lived on our acreage with us. So we had like a big house and a little house. My brother Seth and Joey, his wife, they lived in the small house. And when Seth was first diagnosed with his brain tumor 5 years prior, I was kind of his caretaker a lot because he lived there and, right there. And my parents were divorced. And so, they had both remarried and kind of had some younger families, but I had no problems doing that. And then once he married to his wife, she was able to take care of him a lot. But it was about a month after Jack had died. So in March of 2009, my brother just started having some issues, some headaches and things like that. So he had his third brain surgery on March 13th of 2009. And he had always bounced back from all his surgeries because he was extremely healthy. He was an exercise guy and, he didn't drink, nothing. And it just came back this third time with a vengeance. And 2 months after my husband died, my brother died. He died on April 7th, 2009. So, just he just they removed that brain tumor that third time, and they were going to end up doing some chemo and radiation once he healed from the surgery, but the tumor just came back with a vengeance, and he just died. And it was, at that moment in my point in my life, I was just like, what in the hell is happening? And I was so lost and I didn't know who I was grieving. I didn't know if I was grieving my son or my husband or my brother. And it took a lot of hard work for me to, decipher who I was grieving for and separating those griefs and, still raising my daughter, Gracie, and just doing all the things that I could to survive.
And how old was she at this point? Grace?
Gracie so she was 6 in February when her daddy died, and then she turned 7 in March. So, yeah, so, in between all that, she has this wonderful birthday, but, yeah, it was just, I just really really just wanted her to have this happy life. I didn't want her to be the victim of all these deaths, and I didn't want it to define how we survived and lived our life. So I had to really work on figuring out how to maneuver that.
And what did that look like? Because for people listening, like, my in my growing up, we had a lot of loss early. I had a lot of loss early in my life. My dad, my mom had lost her mom within the year. And so there was just, it was a lot too in
Mhm.
my growing up. But as a kid, um, there wasn't a lot of talk, and this was back, late 80s, early, late 80s. So what did that look like for, yeah, what did that look like with Gracie and like, how did you talk
You
about it? And
Yeah, I've always been the one, to just talk about it. Let's say their names constantly, talk about them, who they were, listen to stories if people would tell us just so she could know who these people were and what kind of people they were. And if we could mirror how they lived life, and that would help us. And it has. And we live big for these people in our lives that have died. And um, I we went to some group therapy, and a lot of it was for kids her age. We went to a local organization here in Nebraska, and it was called Grief's Journey, or Teddy Bear Hollow at the time. I guess they've changed their name, but and that was really helpful for Gracie because they really taught the kids what death looked like, what it all looked like. I mean, from just the artwork that they would do to teaching them. So that was helpful. And then she did see a therapist a couple times, and every time we'd go, the therapist honestly thought she was doing really well. And we just had a strong support system around us. And, our family, it was hard with our family because everybody had lost the same people, right? And we were all grieving differently, and we were all grieving, different people. But um we were able to come together and honor all these people just the same way that we could grieve them. So everybody really wrapped their arms around Gracie. And I journaled a ton, and that was my therapeutic way of dealing with some of it, was journaling. And I just, like I said, still every day I'd get up and I'd make sure, what, Gracie's going to have a good day today. How does that look? And it's not easy. I don't have a magic answer for people, because I know people want that magic fix, but we know that grief cannot be fixed whatsoever. And it just, I time does help. Whether people believe it or not, time does help. It'll never make it go away, but it changes and it evolves. And but that's not going to be the first year, the second year, or the third year. And when you're having compounded grief like we had, it's it's hard.
when did you feel like you could breathe again? Although you did end up having another loss in the mix.
Yes, yes. I feel like after about a year after my husband and my brother had died was when I kind of started feeling better. I was feeling more hope, and I had more faith in me because I had lost a lot of my faith. And but I was feeling that, and I was seeing glimmers of light. And there were things just within my life that was just feeling good, and so I was like, "Okay, okay, we're gonna be okay. This isn't gonna be easy still." And yeah, so that leads to my sister-in-law, my first husband's sister, Jack, Brooke. She died in 2018, so 9 years after her brother had died. And she died from alcoholism. And so that's our choices that we have, and I talk about the choices a lot. And My sister-in-law, Brooke, was an amazing human. She loved life. She was smart. She was beautiful. She had amazing drive, but she couldn't deal with the deaths, and she didn't live in Nebraska, she lived in Colorado. So she was away from all of us when we were all grieving, and she was dealing with it by herself in Colorado. And she had lost her job, and she turned to alcohol because when she would drink, that's when she felt the safest, and that's when she felt the best. And yeah, she ended up, her choice was to drink, and she ended up dying from alcoholism in June of 2018. So, that left her parents without any living children, and so it's heartbreaking. And but that's I talk a lot about with my daughter Gracie. We have choices. I chose to live, and I chose to honor our people, and Brooke didn't know how to do that, and it's not any shame to her. She thought she was doing what felt right because the alcohol made her feel right. She just got stuck into that trap, and it's sad and unfortunate, but it doesn't define who she was as a person at all because if she could have just known, she would have gotten past it.
And if she would have been grieving maybe with the family and had that support system around her to witness other people and who could hold her too and
Exactly.
support her. Yeah.
Exactly. It's really, really sad, and so but, I like I said, it's all our choices that we have, and we really honestly just have to decide every day we're going to how we're going to move forward each and every day, putting one foot in front of the other. And it's not going to be easy. We're going to falter. We're going to turn to maybe stuff that makes us feel better, but we have to continue to journey forward healthy and positive.
And how has Gracie adjusted into young adulthood now?
Yes, she actually just graduated college. So Gracie's now 22, and she just graduated college, and she's doing amazing. And I feel like with her, she honestly has such a good head on her shoulders. And, I think she's just learned by watching. Um, that's I just always kind of tell her, you can do whatever you want. We can be whoever we want. We can strive to do amazing things, be good. And I think she's really just kind of taken those and really just become an amazing young lady. And we still honor and we still talk about our people. We giggle and we laugh when we tell stories, now all the time about them. And we support everything that the our family members meant to us and what they brought to the table for us. The all our grief has turned into this big gigantic bubble of, I don't know, purpose and love, I feel like.
What did your daughter choose to go into?
She got her degree in kinesiology. So
Okay.
it's sports medicine basically, and so she wants to do like medical device sales. She wants to give people abilities to walk again, use their arms again, things like that, whatever that looks like.
To take action in their lives, right?
Yes, yes,
Move.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, to move. So yeah, she's home with us. It's been a blessing because, she was gone for 4 years, and she went out of state, and she was 14 hours away from us when she went. So she graduated high school in 2020 era, so she really didn't have a normal graduation, and then she graduated just now 4 years later, so now she's back home, and, it's so fun having her home.
So when did this greeting card company Spark come up?
It was probably the end of 2021. I am remarried now to my husband Chance, and I would sit there and talk to him and just tell him, the greeting cards. Greeting cards are simple. They're an inexpensive, simple gesture to support a friend. And I was just tired of seeing all the with deepest sympathy, I'm so sorry for your loss, greeting cards. As well as intended as they are, they don't hold any value in my eyes. It's an easy out for people. So I'm just like, why can't we say something like this? So the very first card I had come up with was, I don't know what to say. Let's go eat one of those damn casseroles. So that's what I would give to my friend who maybe had just lost her spouse. I'm not going to give her a with deepest sympathy card. And I just really wanted to figure out how we could change the narrative around grief and change the stigma that grief shows up in cards and, at the stores, at the, all the hallmarks. And I'm not bashing Hallmark whatsoever. They have some wonderful cards, but they don't have people that understand what grievers feel like. And so I came up with a list. I have 160 cards and right now, and they are mostly all grief related. I do not call my cards sympathy cards because I feel like sympathy is something we give the first few weeks after someone dies. And, that's the sympathy and understanding. And then moving forward, how are we going to show up for our friends weeks, months, years later? If we could send a card to our friend once a month, just acknowledging their grief still and, telling them that they are supported. I mean, that is what I wish would have had when I was going through the depths of the grief. If I was having a really crappy day, I'd walk out to my mailbox, and if I had a card that just said, I'm thinking of you, or some of the funny ones that I have, I just wish that I would have had that. But I mean, that's going to change the whole day for your friend because they're going to be like, wow, Angie's thinking of me again. And that means the world to me that I'm not alone in my grief, that people still are acknowledging this. And that's my whole vision with this, And like I said, it's simple. It's not going to fix them because, like I said before, we can't fix grief. It's going to just support them and acknowledge it. And that's all we want. We want to still, even years later, I still love hearing stories about my people. If people will tell me, and with writing this book, I've had people reach out to me that used to work with my late husband, Jack, and they've bought the book and they're just like, Angie, we are so proud of you. And they'll tell me funny stories about Jack. And, that's 15, Jack's been gone 15 years. And I just think that's absolutely amazing that people are doing that. And that's what I want with my cards, even.
So, did you not feel supported?
I felt supported, yes. But I just think even back in 2006, when Garrett had died, people still didn't talk about grief a lot. I just feel like the whole movement of changing the narrative around grief has happened within the past couple years.
COVID.
And I, and I'm seeing this, this grief community that, where I even met you on the socials. I just feel like it's evolving and, we are changing it. And I think no, people I had support from my friends, yes, but, I just don't think people knew, and they didn't know if it was acceptable to still a month later or 2 months later or 3 months later to send me a card. I don't think that they knew that or if it was acceptable.
Or
And
even to share the dark humor that can
exactly.
come out of like the
Ex
casserole thing,
right?
It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, and, and then it's just and it's okay, and I just want people to know that it's okay to do that. But I just feel like, even like you said, when you had your losses, even back in the 80s, I mean, it was really taboo to really talk about stuff like that. You weren't supposed to bring that up. You know, we honored and we kind of started our own. after our son had died, honoring him. But then, here we are, like I said, I think with the social media world that we're living in, finding these grief communities where we are at and starting to change the narratives, it's so important. And I'll give you an example of like the sympathy versus the empathy. Um, there's a greeting card, and this is nothing against anybody. I've kind of talked to them about it, but there's the Greeting Card Association, and they hold what is called the Louis Awards. And the Louis Awards is like the Oscars for greeting cards. So you pay per card to submit your cards. Well, so they have so many different categories, but they have a sympathy category and they don't have an empathy category, but I submitted to the sympathy category. And so then none of my cards won, which is fine. But then we received the feedback from the cards. And one of the comments that I received was very disturbing to me because they said, the cards are okay, but they make me feel uncomfortable. So
Then
I
you're
was,
uncomfortable with your grief, my friend.
yes. And so and then all of a sudden I was just like, oh my gosh, and I actually made a reel about it, like a funny reel on Instagram. And that is my biggest, it didn't go viral, but it went pretty close to being viral because people were astounded that this made this person feel uncomfortable, and it's in a sympathy category. And that is why we need to change the narrative around this grief industry. People need to know. This is why we can't have people in Hallmark that have never had a loss writing our greeting cards, And it starts right here, and that's what I want to do.
You know you're onto something special when you're poking the bear and you're getting a response like that.
Right?
That's yeah.
Yeah.
I actually designed a couple of cards and years ago, like gosh, 5 years ago. And I put them on Redbubble and like just randomly one day I was like, where is this money from? So, someone bought the card. I was like, yay!
That's awesome.
Just put a few out there and I was like, whatever, I'll put it
Yeah.
out there. And so
Yeah,
I've
that's
just
awesome.
been dabbling, but I've understood that too for years that people just don't get it. And to bring some sarcasm and humor into something that's just so heavy, everyone has that friend that will get it. You
Yes.
know what I mean? Like that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I just, it's bringing some lightness to something that's so heavy and you can't even wrap your head around sometimes, right?
Exactly, yeah. Well, yeah, because like, one of them I have, it's the next person that tells me everything's gonna happen for a reason, I'll throat punch him. Just I mean, you know, never would I do any physical harm to anybody, but you know what? My friend she would appreciate that card, and she would understand it. So that's definitely, yeah. I'm enjoying it. I enjoy the greeting cards.
So I had a question here. What was it? It escaped my brain. Um oh, what was it? This is why I should take notes and write stuff down. Um as I'm thinking about it. What is well, let me ask you this. So, I mean, you've shared a lot of, backstory and how you were feeling and supporting Gracie and all of that. But what overall has your grief taught you?
Really, it goes to resilience. It's taught me that we can have joy and happiness together. That the grief and happiness can coexist. And honestly, I just it's taught me to be obviously more empathetic. And I think through everything that I have been through, I'm so amazed by the human body and our mind and what we can tell ourselves to journey through the grief. So that's where the resilience comes in. And I don't think somebody can be resilient if they keep on telling themselves that this is crappy, it's no fair, why did my person have to die? If we tell ourselves negative feelings and thoughts, it's going to be a negative journey and you're going to be stuck. And 15 years later, you're still going to be stuck. But if we can tell ourselves that, you know what, we can be happy, we deserve to be happy, we have to have that faith and trust. And you know what, that's going to evolve throughout the years. And so then when you're 15 years and almost 18 years out from my son dying, I can live an extremely happy life because that's what I'm doing right now. And so I just think our resilience in our bodies and our mind is so powerful, and we just have to tell ourselves that we can.
When it comes to kids, when people say kids are resilient when they've had losses, that's always, I'll tell you this, it's always rubbed me the wrong way because as kids, they don't have a choice.
Exactly.
They don't, it just, I hate when people say that, oh, your kids are so resilient, they'll bounce back.
Yeah.
And I can speak from my own experience, but just knowing the grief that I've experienced, it as a child growing up as a griever, it just changes over time and it's going to show its face again and again and again, and especially with loss in the future because we are human and you love and you lose, right? And
Right.
we're taught how to acquire people and things but not what to do when we lose them. And so um you mentioned and you touched on your parents' divorce. So your son wasn't your first loss. So you had other losses, I imagine, growing up, and pet loss and probably maybe friends and moving and all of these other things. Can you speak to that a little bit and what you learned about grief growing up and maybe in hindsight, what you took from those early experiences in your life?
Well, I did experience probably my first traumatic loss was probably when I was about 7. My uncle was killed in an accident. And so I just remember that feeling of wow, and I would say again, like back in the day, we just didn't talk about that. And so it was kind of hush hush and different things. I mean, it was a very public accident. He was on the volunteer fire department and the rescue squad got hit by a train. And so 3 of the members had died and 2 had lived. And so it was a very public accident, but um, you know, we didn't talk a lot about it. And then, my grandparents died when I was younger, and then my parents divorced when I um the year after I graduated high school. And so through all that, I guess I would say that I just really learned how to, I guess, separate some of those losses and grief. And just, like I said, I journal a lot and I read a lot. And so I think separating grief and losses into what they are. So, it's okay, this was a bad accident. I we can't put blame on like losses. I don't like that. Like people are like, well, why would God let this happen to your son? Why would God let this happen to your husband? Why would God let your uncle get hit by a train? Things like that. But God doesn't allow that, and I just he's there for us when we go through these hardest things. And I guess I just probably stuffed a lot of it sometimes when I was younger just because we were taught to do that. And so then as I grew and then as I come upon my first loss of my major loss that catapulted me into losses that I never would ever, turn back and be the same from. That's when I really learned about what death was and how to journey through it. And I've learned now more so that talking about all those losses are probably the biggest thing that really helped, and I just wish that we could have back in the day talked about those losses because I think it really could have changed because I'm certain that my parents' divorce probably stemmed from a lot of the losses that they had endured. My dad's brother was the one that had died, so my dad didn't deal with it, they just didn't talk about it. And so then, you know, my dad drank and then my parents got divorced and then, it's a cycle. And so how can we move forward in these losses in a healthy manner? And I guess that's what I've learned to do is just do it with all our people in mind and keeping their memories alive.
Well, my next question is one tip you would give other hurting hearts, and I would say that that's a pretty good tip.
Yes, yes, I would. Yeah, and I've always believed in the choices that we make. And um if you're really, really hurting, you know, don't expect don't expect change immediately. And I always, say, give grace because you're going to have a great day one day, and the next day, you're gonna take a couple steps back, and it's going to take time for your heart to feel love again and normal again, and, you can have it there. I had love for my daughter the whole time, but I didn't really care about the outside world as much. I didn't care about the outside noise, and, but it's the choices that we have. So how do we choose to love and honor our people?
You had touched on it a little bit about having lost your faith a little bit. And so the role of faith and spirituality through your grieving process, I know that was a huge aspect of my grief story. Can you share a little bit about what that looked like and how that changed over time?
Yeah, it was really after my brother had died that I had lost all faith, and I couldn't understand how this was happening, why this was happening again and again. And you always hear the saying, why do all the good ones go young, And I kind of just slowly journaled about it. I went to a group that was a Christian led group, and that is really what changed a lot for me, is because I learned about death and how it is in the Bible and God. And then I started putting my faith back into Him. And I learned, like I said earlier, that, you know, we are all built a certain way, and so for my son to be born with a heart defect, that's just something that happened. And, my husband and my brother, both with cancer, it's just their genetic disposition, environmental things. We don't know. But what I know is where I'm at today is not because I am the strongest human in the world. It's because I've been carried, and something bigger than me is holding me through all this, and they're guiding me. And I have to believe that. And I have to believe that all my people are safe. But for me, I just really leaned into reading a lot about it and just trying to understand what faith and death and God all meant.
What was the toll of grief on your health over the years? Do you recognize did you have physical symptoms? Like how did the grief manifest for you? Because in grief recovery, which is the program I adore and love and changed my life, but we talk about STIRBs, short-term energy relieving behavior. So you were talking about alcohol and just how people use these outside things to cope. And so how did and either grief will manifest in physical symptoms or will turn to these things to help us to feel better for a short period of time. So how did the grief manifest for you?
I would say that, I after our son's death, I really lost a lot of weight. That was my kind of my health thing. I just didn't want to eat. I didn't care. Um, After my husband had died and my brother died, I didn't turn to anything. I didn't drink a, l- a lot more than I had normally. I had drinks. But my health wise, I just honestly, like I said, I guess I, I didn't eat a lot. So I lost weight that way. But, I was really just I think my mind was the biggest recovery thing that I needed to figure out how to be present, and I had to be whole for Gracie. And I honestly didn't turn to anything negative for myself. And I didn't find I don't have an addictive personality, so I don't turn to, that. But mine was mostly all my mind work and how could I stay healthy. And the healthiest way I could be would be to work on my mind. And that was journaling and reading and, I mean, traveling. Gracie and I traveled quite a bit. We would go visit friends and just being present. So, yeah, for me, I didn't really turn to anything that hindered me from my process.
Well, even exercise can be a stir. So it can
Yes.
be good things too.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Workaholism.
Yeah. And, I did not turn to work. That was one thing I slacked on. It's just, but yeah, just I don't know. Yeah, I don't have anything. That's one of the things that I've kind of always been wondered about, Maybe I need to deep dive into that a little bit more, go back into those corners of my mind and really see about what I did. That'd probably be a good exercise for me.
I because there's these myths of grief, right? It's keep busy,
Mhm.
grieve alone, don't feel bad. There's so many time heals all wounds, which you touched on time, but it's not
Yeah,
it's not the time itself, it's the action that you take within the time, that
exactly.
really matters. And it sounds like you were, you know, surviving, but yet also doing what you knew to get more control or what have you of your thoughts and your thought
Yeah.
process. And it's so easy to downward spiral, to allow your thoughts to downward spiral and yeah,
Yeah.
take you
I
down.
just I always, I had a friend of mine, she had lost her husband 2 years prior to me losing my first husband Jack. And she was a good resource for me, but when I would have bad days, we would do this with each other. We would just be like, "Okay, you're allowed to have this one bad day. But tomorrow you're going to get up and you're going to change your thought process and you're going to change, your mind and everything." And, just giving ourselves that permission to be, because I feel like people honestly, like they want to do something to fix it. Even ourselves as grievers, we want to feel how we felt before. We want to feel the same way. And, we just can't. But if we can allow ourselves that time to grieve or just to be or just to not do a single thing. Like I said, if you want to lay in bed all day for a day, lay in bed all day. There's nothing wrong with that. And I I feel that that is part of the whole healing aspect of grief is doing that. But you know what? Then she would check on me the next day. "Okay, Angie, how are you today? Are you going to get up and shower and go?" And yes, I would. And I just and also just yeah, like you said, exercising and being outside with nature. But I just think giving ourselves permission to be and not rush, and don't rush the grief process either. It takes time, and I feel like a lot of people rush it.
Well, we are let's just take a shot, let's take a pill, let's, you know.
Let's call Amazon,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Curbside, like, we are such an impatient society, it is redonkulous.
Yes, yes, I agree 100%.
How would you describe the Angie before loss versus the Angie after loss?
Well, that's a good question. I would say that I was way more outgoing. Um, I was way more friendly. And don't get me wrong, I'm a very outgoing, friendly person now, but it's evolved and changed. It was easier for me to befriend. Now I feel like I don't befriend people easily, and I think they don't, because I think I have this aura around me, and people get scared of grief. So if they know about my story or any loss that I've had, they kind of run or turn their head, or they just don't want to dive deep because I think they think it's contagious, but it's not. But I've had a lot of strange situations with that. But I was very just more very laid back, more easygoing, and like I said, more friendly. And now I get a little bit more anxious. I really deep dive into who's going to be my friend and who's going to be in my life. And that's maybe something like of a protected part of me. Like I don't want to lose any more people. So if I don't bring all these people in my life, maybe I won't lose them. Um so yeah, I would say I have a lot more anxiety in that aspect. And yeah, I wish I had some of my free thoughts that I used to have, because now I don't have those free thoughts as much. And um, I've just kind of adapted all my, like I said, I still have all those feelings. I'm still a nice person because I am, but they've all adapted differently than what I was before.
I resonate with that a lot. Um, I don't know if it's my resting bitch face or my aura, but it's probably my aura too, but I tend to poke the bear when I'm, meeting people, and it's because it's like you don't have time for bullshit. Like, let's cut the bullshit. Let's cut the surface level talk. Like, tell me your deepest desires and your dreams. Like, what do you want to do with your life? Like like those are the kind of the questions that I want to talk about. And it's like it's really hard to find those people, like the deep thinkers and the thought-provoking questions and the insightful, you know, people,
Yeah.
and I think because we get so caught up in the mundane daily life, the hamster wheel, we don't even stop to think about um the things that ignited us when we were kids, right? Like, just
Mhm.
actually one day, just over Mother's Day weekend, there was three little girls, and the semi truck just toots its horn, and the girls just so giddy and just, just like this. And it was so funny because I never shared that with anybody. And as I was sitting there, I was thinking, gosh, I was taken back. I was having some ice cream with my girls. They're 17 and a half and six, 15 already.
Yeah.
And I just was taken back in time in that instant to see, I saw them, like, doing that. My daughter does this still to this day when she gets excited. And yeah, so it just took me back in time, but I don't know where I was going with that.
Yeah, I just think it's like, the way society has grown and changed and evolved, that, we are losing, like, the deep conversations with people. It is hard to find those people that we can match up with and have those, just sit there and talk about and walk away feeling just refreshed. I leave a lot of conversations feeling icky, and I don't. I haven't pinpointed exactly why, but like I said, like I just when I first kind of meet them in a situation and they ask me, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Well, I have this greeting card business." "Oh, that's awesome, And they're like, "What kind of card?" And I tell them and I'm like, "Well, they're mostly grief cards." And they're like, "Why would you do that?" And then I'm like, "Well, do you have a while?" No, but so then I kind of explain and then I can see their whole demeanor change. And so then I just like and then I get sad sometimes cuz I'm like, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm the same person but different, but I still want to have the deep conversations and it doesn't have to evolve all around me. I want to hear all about you, and so that's yeah, so I feel like in society and it's kind of like the fast and go of the world that we were talking about that people don't want to take the time to learn and have those deep conversations anymore. And I feel like we have to get back to that.
Well, and I think they're afraid. I
Mhm.
think it's fear. Imagine what people say to me. I work with grievers. Like I work
Yeah.
with grievers and I do energy healing and all this weird stuff, and oh, she might
Yeah.
like do some voodoo on me or she might like, get me to like confess and word vomit all of my grief. You know what I mean? Like
Explain my real feelings, right? I mean, people that they're scared of their real feelings.
I
I'm
had someone actually just word vomit, just let it all out in a very public place. And I felt so, obviously empathy for this person, right? But I was like a little bit like, what's the word? What is the best word to describe that feeling I had? It was refreshing. It was refreshing
Yeah,
that
they
someone
probably felt
was
the same feeling.
probably, it's like there is something about giving it a voice. And, I think so many of us, I'm going to get into like some not voodoo, woo woo talk, but like a throat wound, right? I think so many people have a throat wound, especially if, as females, particularly, or young girls that grew up and, be seen and not heard and don't use your voice or you're too loud or you're too much or you're too much of this or too much of that. And so we just kind of minimize our voice and we don't use it. And I guess that's been the greatest gift for me in having my podcast. And maybe you can relate is that it's helped me find my voice in what I experienced and sharing stories with people and meeting people, like you said, just sharing in community with other grievers.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I do. I feel like when I hear stories after people talk about their stories during the podcast and then when I re-listen to them and I just I take away so much. I take away from that initial conversation. And then when I re-listen to it, I take away more and I hear more and I hear more of what they were saying because then I can listen to more tone, their tone of their voice and different things like that. And then I have a whole different perspective of what they are feeling and going through, and it's absolutely amazing. I mean, our that's why I just, we these platforms that we're able to utilize, such as the podcasts and writing our books, and even our socials, it's sharing our stories is so huge for everybody because it is bringing out so much for so many others that they're maybe just sitting on the sidelines and they hear the podcast and then they read about or if we're talking about our books they're like, well, I could maybe do that. And so it's sparking stuff in people and we are, like I said earlier, we're changing this narrative and I feel the evolution of this really taking place. And I'm really excited for what it's gonna do for future grievers, because I just feel like sharing our stories, however that looks, even if I've told people before, even if you write a full book and you never publish it, that's okay because you shared your story, you shared it. And that's you shared it within yourself, and that's okay too. You don't have to publish a book to be great. You don't have to have a podcast you know, you can just sit there, but you're growing by hearing stories.
And that is a form of giving it a voice too. And
Yep.
journaling, I
Yep.
journal. I've journaled
Yes.
since I was 14.
That's
I
awesome.
haven't quit, it was my outlet very early on too. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's so cathartic for people to be able to write down things. And I just people are like, sometimes I've heard people say, "Well, I could never write a book." Well, no, you could write a book. Write it all out. I don't care. Type it all out, however you want, but you don't have to publish it. No, it's you're still doing the same thing I'm doing. I just decided to publish mine and you didn't. But we at the end, we did the exact same thing.
that's exactly true. Yeah. Like I said before when we started recording, it's like I think people think to write a book, it's this huge, and it is a big project, right? I'm
Mhm.
not going to deny that or minimize that. It's a
Yeah.
project, but it's not as scary as some people make it out to be. You don't have to have a publisher. You can self-publish, which there's there's so much free information out there. I mean, actually my tagline is Google that shit because I mean, I've learned so much by Googling and I guess I've never been one that's been afraid to like dive head first and let the rabbit hole, swallow me whole. But, I mean, that's the fun of it, right? Like
Yeah.
and that reminds me of what I was telling with the story with the little girls.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, I didn't tell her about that, but she had the exact same story across 2,000 miles away where she saw these two little girls and she saw them get so excited and we were in a Voxer group together and
Yeah.
we've known each other online now for like 4+ years, but she's one of those people, right, where we talk about stuff like we're talking here, like have deep
Uh-huh.
conversations. But she was like, just never, it was a reminder to me, she said, to never lose that spark, never lose that joy that you had as a little kid, just seeing, having someone toot their horn and give you, and I told her my story and it's like mind blowing, like the synchronicity of that. It
Yeah,
was
that
just
is
a
amazing.
reminder again to me, you know, what brought you joy as a kid? How can you bring some more of that into your life as a griever in your adult life?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. I
there's
love that.
messages there for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I absolutely love that because that's the joy as a child is absolutely beautiful, and yeah, we need more of that in our adult life.
To play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Instead of just these schedules and these deadlines and just the anxiety that life brings everybody, if we could just let it go and just be, that would be amazing.
So what would a day of play look like for you?
Well, I'm actually going to do it later on here. My daughter, since she's back, we're going to go golfing. And so she wants to pick up and learn golfing and she wants us to learn how to play pickleball. So it's like, it's a beautiful day in Nebraska finally today. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, we're gonna make time and we're gonna go golf this afternoon. And so that's what we're gonna do. So today, and we're just gonna have fun and we'll probably giggle because she will probably be, I golf. So I do golf already and I'm on a ladies league, but she doesn't golf. So we'll probably giggle at the way she hits the ball and all that. And it'll just be, easy going. And like I said, having her home has brought so much life kind of back into
Mm.
our house that was missing, not my husband and I, it's just been the 2 of us and, which has been great, and, we've had an amazing 4 years, but having her here just brings a totally different element of joy back into our house and laughter, and because she's just, she's a silly 22-year-old girl.
And the energy, right? It's a
Yeah.
different energy. And
Yes, yes, and we've been taking she's, walks every day. So we've been going for walks every day. And, it's just been so amazing. And, that's just, I'm, I'm learning to, I guess, slow down in a sense too. Like, I don't have to sit in front of my computer and do. I guess built, I'm going to build my career around my life, and the way I want it to look like. So I'm able to do that right now. So that's what we're going to do.
I'm celebrating that for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you would like to share?
I really just want people to know that, if you are a griever and you've lost someone, just really just give yourself the grace that you deserve, and do not rush your grief and your grief journey, because it's yours, and you get to do it your way, and you need to move through it and journey through it. So I really want people to honor those feelings that they're doing as they're grieving. And then if you're not the griever, if you're on the outside and you have your best buddy or anybody going through something tough, meet them where they're at, and don't try to rush ahead of them. Speak their people's names, just acknowledge them. Don't try to fix them. And, you will be the best support system that they need. And just always continue to reach out to them, even if they tell you no 25 times. The 26th time, they'll say, "Thank you for reaching out to me. I needed to hear you today."
And just buy 26 of Angie's cards and then
Yeah,
send them
perfect.
like
That'll get you
every
through two
week for
years.
26 days. Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
So where can people find your cards and connect with you?
On socials, uh, Facebook and Instagram, I'm at Butterflies and Halos. And then my website is butterfliesandhalos.com. All my cards are there. I'm also, if you're an Etsy person and prefer that, I'm on Etsy as well, Butterflies and Halos. And you can order my cards there. I have some other stationery products, as some stickers and notebooks, and my book will be on there for sale here probably within the next week or so. And yeah, everything's butterflies and halos.
How did you
And
come up with
then,
that name?
butterflies are my sign that I've had since my son died. And then the butterfly is just the symbolism of a butterfly and the transformation that they make, and the spiritual transformation that they make is something that I hold really dear. And then the halos are for all my people, so that have died. And so I kind of meshed them together for butterflies and halos.
I love
Yeah,
that.
I love it. And then for anybody that is on here, if you use the code podcast 15, you can get 15% off your first order.
Is it all caps, lower caps?
All caps, podcast 15. Yep. And then that's accessible on Etsy or my website.
And I will add that to the show notes as well.
Yeah,
How long is
yeah.
that good for?
It's never ending.
Okay.
Yep,
All
yep.
right.
So they can use it whenever.
All right. Well, thank you
Yes.
so much, Angie,
Well,
for sharing
thank
your
you.
story, for having this deep dive conversation with me, for the work that you're doing in this movement that you and I are both part of. I think is moving the needle, even
Yes,
if
thank
it's little
you.
by little.
Yeah,
So
yeah, we'll get there, but I appreciate everything you're doing as well, and I appreciate being on here and sharing, and just the beautiful conversation. And then hopefully we can have you on our podcast here in the next few months, and that would be amazing.
I would love that. Thank you
Yes,
for the invitation.
yes,
And thank
perfect.
you again for being my guest.
Yes, thank you.
And remember, when you unleash your heart, you unleash your life. Much love.